Good morning and welcome to AWS at Web Summit 2018. We've got a large audience here in the theatre in Lisbon, so thanks for joining us. Those of you in the theatre may not know that we're also streaming all of the content from Web Summit live on twitch.tv/AWS. So if you are watching on Twitch, they're in that camera at the back of the room, by the way, if you all want to turn around and say hi to them watching us on the stream back there. So taking questions on the stream live, as well as taking questions in the room at the end of the session. And I'm going to kick off the program today with a discussion about how developers can make use of the cloud to build applications. This is going to be a bit of a quick tour around AWS just to introduce Amazon Web Services to you if you're completely new to the topic. And then we'll also spend a little bit of time talking about places you can go and resources that you can use to learn more about how you can build apps using the AWS Cloud. We'll have this session every morning this week at 10. And then I'll close up today by talking about what we have on the content agenda for the rest of the day. We have 21 sessions here at Web Summit in Lisbon over the course of the next 3 days, covering all kinds of different aspects of using the cloud to build applications. So hopefully there'll be something for everybody here at the show, and hopefully you'll return if you're with us on Twitch or in the theatre here and watch and listen to some of our other presenters over the course of the next 3 days. Okay, oh, by the way, I'm Ian Massingham. I lead developer evangelism at AWS and have lots of my team here from around the world, actually, to talk to you over the course of the program here at Web Summit this week. Okay, so what's different about AWS and the cloud? I know that the audience here is on the younger end of the scale in the main part, substantially younger than me in a lot of cases. But who was using technology to create applications or run services, say 10 to 12 years ago? Okay, a minority of people. So for everybody that didn't put their hand up, let me tell you that in the old days, we used to have to wait for things, okay? When we wanted a service or a server, we would open a ticket with an IT team. The IT team would go away and buy stuff, okay? And then weeks or months later, we would get the technology that we needed to run our app or deploy our software. Can you imagine that? Sounds stupid, right? But that's actually what old people like me used to do for years and years and years. And today, we don't do that anymore, okay? So let's ask a different question. If you were starting today to build a new app or build a brand new business that needed technology, how many people would actually buy infrastructure of any type and own and operate infrastructure of any type in order to do that? In order to do things like run email, provide collaboration services, host websites, run the back end for a mobile app, analyze data, or any of the other things that are really important in building a business. Who would buy server infrastructure in order to do that if they were starting today? If you're at the front, I'll just reassure you that nobody behind you is putting their hand up either, all right? So you're not alone in keeping your hands down. This is just not how we do technology anymore. The way we do technology now is by using services, and in the main part, we provision those services using APIs. We might have a console or a website on the front of it, but in the main part, the services at the back end are getting built out using an API layer that provisions all the resources for us in a way which just a few years ago we'd have thought was kind of like magic, really, in terms of the capabilities that are at our fingertips. This is completely different to how things used to be, and that's really the shift that's happened over the course of the last 12 to 10 years. AWS was launched back in 2006, and we were the first cloud provider to offer services under this model. And just in that short period of 12 years, everything's changed, right? We use services today in a completely different way to how we used to use them before. And what this means for developers and for product builders and for business people is you can now focus on the things that are unique about your particular idea or unique about your particular business. You don't have to get involved in these low-level infrastructure activities, these low-level technology activities that have been done by businesses since technology was invented. You can hand all that stuff over to a platform, and you can focus on the things that are really unique about your particular problem space, unique about the business that you're trying to build. And that is, again, really, really different to how things used to be. Okay, so what do we actually have? I talked about services quite a few times there, and I talked about provisioning services using an API, but what do we actually have in terms of services that developers can make use of? Well, the simple answer to that question is we have a lot of stuff. We have over 125 different services that you can make use of today. So many, in fact, that this slide is kind of useless because even if you're like me right up on stage, you can't read any of this stuff. So let's just take a quick tour around some of the most important parts of the platform for developers and give you a flavor of what we have and how you can put some of these services to work. Okay, infrastructure and core services. Infrastructure in AWS is organized into regions. We have 18 of these geographic regions around the world that customers can use, several in the US. Here in Europe, we have Dublin, London, Paris, and Frankfurt, with another one coming in Stockholm in a few months' time. Okay? So these infrastructure regions are the places in the world where you create the resources that you want to use to build or run your applications. Why might I choose a specific region over another region? There's basically three reasons. The first is latency. It pays for me to put my application close to where my users are. If anyone's ever played a first-person shooter, like Counter-Strike or Destiny, you will know what the effect of lag is, what the effect of latency is on your effectiveness in playing that game. You get hammered by the people that have got lower latency than you. And that experience improvement carries over into online applications as well. There's lots of research out there that shows that there's a direct correlation between good application performance and people using your applications or services to a greater degree. Not only in gaming, but also in web applications like Amazon.com, for example. We've observed that the lower we drive latency, the more money people will spend on the website. They have a higher propensity to buy with a really snappy user experience. So put your application close to where your customers are. That's the first thing. Second thing is compliance. So you might have a requirement to keep your data in a certain geography for legislative or regulatory reasons, okay? In Australia, for example, if you're serving financial services customers, you want to have your data in Australia and keep your data in Australia. You can use our Sydney region to do that. We never move data out of a region autonomously. You as a customer can copy it from region to region, but we never move data out of a region without your directive to do so. Okay, so you can select a region based on a particular location that you need to be in with your app. And then thirdly, cost. There's a differential pricing model here. Not all regions cost the same. If you want to use our region in Sao Paulo, Brazil, you'll find that it's slightly more expensive than a region in Dublin, Ireland, for example. So if you really genuinely don't care where your application or workload runs, you can run it in a location which is cost optimal. Or you can blend those things together. I want to have a lowest cost region that's within 50 milliseconds of where my users are, for example, and take a couple of different factors into account. Okay, so that's regions and infrastructure. We also have over 110 points of presence around the world for further improving the experience for your customers using apps built on the platform. This supports services like Route 53, which is our DNS resolver, and also services like our API gateway and services like caching in our content distribution network as well. So you can push some services out right to one of those edge locations and benefit from really accelerated performance by doing that. So that's all in this infrastructure category down here. Then we have core services, and these were some of the original services that AWS launched back in 2006. Services for running virtual machines in the cloud. It's something called Amazon EC2, or the Elastic Compute Cloud. Makes it really easy to spin up a machine. There's actually over 15 different types of virtual hardware platform that you can use there with all kinds of special resources like field programmable gate arrays or FPGAs for silicon accelerated algorithm performance, or high-performance FPUs, floating point units, for running deep learning neural network model training applications. So you can use special purpose compute resources within this EC2 service. There's also lots of services for things like networking, for load balancing, for laying out networks in a way which matches your security, compliance, or performance requirements. There are storage services, a service called Amazon S3. This is for object storage. It's also a very high performance, highly durable, highly scalable web server that you can use to host static websites or to deliver content to users. And then we have database services in the form of relational database services, a service called RDS. Supports many different types of relational database engine. You can spin up your DB instance in the cloud. You can establish replication across what we call availability zones within a region. And this will give you high performance, high durability, and excellent failover characteristics for your critical data stores inside a relational data model. Or you can create DynamoDB tables. This is our non-relational NoSQL database service that allows you to establish a simpler data model, but with very, very high low latency performance for critical apps, used really extensively in things like mobile gaming, where scalability and performance is a really key criteria for application developers, of course. So we have all kinds of services for data storage there. These are our core services that you provision within these infrastructure regions around the world. Should say a little bit more about availability zones, actually. I mentioned it there when I was talking about databases, but within each of our regions, we have multiple availability zones. And those availability zones, or AZs as we call them, are independent failure domains. So you can deploy your application across multiple failure domains, multiple data centers, directly from the AWS Console or from one of our SDKs or APIs. So it puts, I'd say that it puts infrastructure into the hands of individual developers that for a long time was the preserve of the ultra well capitalized financial services institution or the government departments of this world that have very deep pockets and lots of resources. Now, as an individual developer, you can build applications that are very durable by using that availability zone construct, striping your application and data across multiple data centers in the same region, and giving you the capability to tolerate failures. So if a data center fails, your application can continue to run. Okay, so that's what the availability zone construct is for. Next thing to talk about is security and compliance. And this is a really substantial investment area for Amazon Web Services. We spend a lot of money to ensure that our services are operated in a way which complies with important information security and governance standards that are, of course, absolutely critical to customers. We also spend a lot of money on service innovation in this area to create new services that allow customers to further enhance their security posture in the cloud. And this is a counterintuitive characteristic of AWS that I really love it. The fact that a few years ago, customers would say, we're nervous about using the cloud. Is it secure? Can we meet the compliance standards that we need to meet if we use the cloud? And if you talk to substantial users of AWS today in financial services, in government, in retail, they're saying exactly the opposite. They're saying, is it safe for us to stay in our own data centers? Do we have the skills, infrastructure investment, and capabilities that we need to operate our own technology in a way which meets the high standard set by AWS? Okay, so the situation has completely flipped. Okay, and that is because for us, information security is a core platform characteristic. When we improve the platform for one customer in finance or one customer in public sector, every other customer that chooses to use AWS benefits from that improvement. So if you're a two-person startup, you've got access to cryptography, auditing, identity-based access management that is exactly the same as the world's largest investment banks. There is literally no difference between the capabilities that you have. So again, it's democratizing access to really high-quality technology, and it's offloading heavy lifting from developers in an area of risk to a provider that can do that as a natural component of the services that they provide. Okay? We have transparency on our auditing and compliance capabilities, and if you visit aws.amazon.com/compliance, you can download compliance reports for things like PCI DSS, for HIPAA, which is a health information protection standard that is applicable in the US, for ISO 27001, for ISO 2718, which is the cloud privacy standard. You can access information about GDPR compliance on AWS as well. So everything is there, transparently available for customers to use and take advantage of. Moving up the stack a little bit out of these foundational components, which are key to everything that we do, we also have higher level services that developers can directly use to build applications. We have a full suite of services for Internet of Things or connected device applications, ranging from device-side SDKs that you can put onto your wearables, microcontroller-based systems, or onto other connected devices that you might be building, including a microcontroller operating system that we support and maintain called FreeRTOS, which includes integration into AWS IoT, as well as the back-end components for IoT, such as messaging gateways, identity and access management, the ability to run code in response to events which might originate on connected devices, as well as data synchronization and device state management. So there's a full suite of services for IoT apps. And similarly, in the machine learning and AI space, we have a complete portfolio of services for machine learning developers, as well as a portfolio of AI services for developers that want to incorporate features like natural language understanding or image processing or speech generation directly into their applications as well. And we're going to have lots of content in the theater this week focusing on AI and machine learning. It's an incredibly hot topic area for developers. And if you want to learn more about many of the services that you can see here in this area, come and see us in the course of the program and check out some of our AI and machine learning sessions. And then we have analytics and data engineering services. These are for things like dealing with streaming data, clickstream data in applications, for example, or streaming telemetry data that might come off connected device applications. You can process that data, analyze it, and take action based on that analysis natively in the cloud. These are managed services that offload the heavy lifting associated with doing things like running Kafka clusters or operating Hadoop or Spark infrastructure that you might want to run in order to build these kinds of high volume, high performance, very reliable data engineering applications. We have a complete suite of services for that stuff. App services, this is for building loosely coupled applications with really good durability and failure tolerance characteristics. It's for embedding search or workflow into apps that you might be building, or for sending transactional email to customers using our service SES. So you can plug these components directly into your apps using our SDKs and benefit from very reliable, durable, reusable service components that, again, remove the need for you to build things that have been built before. Then we have tools for managing the systems development lifecycle in the form of DevOps tools. We have a complete suite of services for mobile applications as well, and also for browser-based apps, which we'll cover in more detail over the course of the content program here this week. But you can incorporate an AWS SDK directly into an Android or iOS app. We can manage identity for you. We can manage social sign-on. We can manage push notifications. We can manage in-app analytics for you. We can do all of that using a simple-to-use suite of cloud services that you can integrate natively into your iOS or Android development pipelines. So there's a huge amount of stuff there for developers of all types. And we'll talk about many of these topics in a lot more detail over the course of the week. This is just a 20,000-foot preview of some of the stuff that we have coming up. Now, there's a lot of stuff on that preceding slide. There's also another characteristic of AWS, which can make it quite challenging as a developer to keep up to date with the platform, and that is the pace of innovation. Okay? In 2017, we announced 1,430 new services and feature enhancements. Okay? And I can tell you, we don't launch anything on weekends, and we also don't launch at certain times of the year when we have blackout periods for one reason or another, such as holidays. Okay? So those 1,430 launches were consolidated into substantially less than 365 days. So the average launch rate is 5 or 6 new things pretty much every day of the year that we're launching services. And I'll say something else, which is we've got a conference coming up in 2 or 3 weeks called AWS Reinvent, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And there'll be a torrent, a deluge, a tsunami of new stuff coming at that conference. So how do you stay up to date with all of this stuff we're doing? And how do you make sure that you're taking advantage of the latest services when you're building new applications, that you're avoiding heavy lifting and using the maximum amount of value that you can get from a cloud platform like AWS? We'll return and answer that question in a second. But first, I want to show you a little bit about how you get started practically with the services using our interface, the AWS Console. So, let's do this. Any Swiss people here? Recognize this? Oh, got the wrong screen up. Let's do this. Recognize this? It's the Eiger, north face of the Eiger. Cool, so we'll go here. This is the AWS Console. And as I was mentioning earlier, we have a lot of services, okay? So all of the different services that we have are laid out within the AWS Console here, and you'll see there's a lot of them. So many, in fact, that we have a search feature to help you find the service that you want to use. And I'm going to show you how to get started with AWS using a service called CodeStar, which I believe is one of the quickest and easiest ways for developers to get started with full-blown AWS service usage. You can see I've already got a couple of applications that I've set up in this service in the North Virginia region over in the US. But I'm going to jump over to London and do something in London just to show you how easy it is to build services in different locations around the world. So I'm now operating in the EU London region, and you can see that from the drop-down up here, which denotes the current location where I'm going to create services, okay? So jumping between regions to create services in different locations in the world is that simple in the console. I just select a different region, and 2 seconds later I can be provisioning in Tokyo instead of in London. It's kind of nice, okay? So I'll start a new project, and what I'm presented with here is a range of different templates that I can use to deploy applications of different types, okay? And I can filter these by programming language that I want to use. So let's just filter on Node.js. I can filter on application category. I want a web service, for example. I can filter down, or a web application. I can filter down and see that. And I can also filter down by deployment target. And this service actually supports deployment to a variety of different AWS services. I can deploy my application on EC2, so I can run it on a cluster of virtual machines. I can deploy my application into a managed runtime environment that we have called AWS Elastic Beanstalk. That will create a load-balanced cluster of machines with blue-green deployment capabilities and the ability to deploy directly from my Git workspace. So I can push to an endpoint and deploy applications straight into Elastic Beanstalk. Or I can deploy on AWS Lambda, which is a serverless code execution environment that we have. Allows me to establish applications behind API endpoints and run those applications in response to events. So when a user hits the API endpoint, my code will get executed. I don't have any instances, okay, so I have no fixed costs. And if I have low usage on my application, I could have 0 cost, and my costs will only start to accrue when users actually start to hit my app, which sounds kind of like a good option to me, so I'm going to use that one, okay? So we'll deploy our Node.js web application, give it a name, okay? And I can use either AWS Code Commit, which is our own Git-compatible source control service, okay, running inside an AWS region, protected by all of our security controls, with the code base stored durably on Amazon S3 under the covers. So that's one option that I have, very tightly regulated service with really strong identity and access management services. Or if I'm more code in the open and I want to have collaborators on my project that are maybe outside my org, then I can use GitHub as a source code repository and integrate my Git code base directly into this tool. I'm going to go with Code Commit for simplicity here, so I don't have to set up Git credentials if I do that. I can just hit next, create my project, and then in the background, the resources for my project are being created, okay? So what's happening there in the background is my source code repository is getting built, my continuous integration and build pipeline is getting built, and the first deployment of my application is taking place. So when that's finished, I'll be able to see my app, I'll be able to check out the application template from the source code repository onto my local machine, I'll be able to make changes, I'll be able to push to that repository, and when I push to that repository, my CI/CD pipeline will automatically run, and a new version of my application will automatically get deployed into production. So I have a full systems development lifecycle tool chain that's been provisioned for me just by filling out those boxes and clicking OK on that button, okay, in the background. So I'll copy these credentials here, skip this, and you'll see that my project is being set up in the background, okay, and that'll take a few minutes to run. So, like every good cook, I have a pre-prepared version that I baked a little bit earlier on, and if I jump back onto the console, this one's actually in a different region, so I will go back to CodeStar, and I will jump over to Oregon. This is in the Portland area, this particular region in PDX. And you'll see that I have an application here called Node Web App Demo. And this is the dashboard that gets created when my application has been provisioned within CodeStar. So I have panels here that represent all of those different services that I talked about. This is my commit history. This one's actually managed out on GitHub. So I can open my source code repository out on GitHub for this demo app, and you'll see this is what gets bootstrapped into the GitHub environment when I create that template application. This is what I check out and modify and commit my changes to in order to drive the pipeline. I have my application monitoring here from an AWS service called Amazon CloudWatch, which shows me usage metrics for my app. And I can drill into that and see more details. I have my continuous deployment pipeline here, my source code, my build, and my deploy phase. And if I was to check in a change, you would see this pipeline start to operate as my change gets checked in. And then I have my application endpoint here. So if I hit my application endpoint, you will see my app. I also have this particular application hosted on a custom domain as well. So this is the same application running on a custom domain, webapp.aws-example.es. And you should see some usage appear in a moment when this dashboard updates as well. So let's just jump back over onto our other example. So you can see that our environment has been bootstrapped and our application endpoints are still in the process of being provisioned for our new application. Let's check out our source code from the new app that we just created. Okay, I don't have my credentials there. So that's just to show you that we have an endpoint available to us using the source code repository that was just created by the pipeline. What I can do is check a change into the new version, into the preceding version that was already running. So this is the source tree for my application. And this is the HTML file template which is rendered to create that web page that you can see right here. And if you look at the bottom there, it says designed and developed with love in Seattle. So we can change that in our source template because we're obviously in Lisbon today. So we'll save that file. And you'll see that the timestamp on our index has just changed to 1026, which is now. So we've committed a change there to our local source repository, push that to our master in GitHub, and if we jump over onto that GitHub page that you were looking at a second ago, you should see that there's a commit now in the public directory that you can see here where it says update for Lisbon. That was committed 19 seconds ago. And if we jump back over onto the CodeStar console for that particular deployment and hit refresh, you'll see that our build phase has already been triggered. So we've picked up that change within our source code repo, and we have a new build of our application that's currently in progress, and that will ultimately get pushed out and replace the deployed version of that Lambda function, and you'll see the update in that template in a couple of minutes. So we'll let that run, and we'll finish up the slides while that happens, and we'll return to that demo at the very end of this session. Okay, so I said that I would address the question of how you stay up to date with AWS. I think it's a pretty important topic, and we've got lots of resources available for developers that want to learn more about the platform and also stay up to date with new things. So there's a few different resources for you here. If you have a modern smartphone, by the way, you don't need a QR reader. Just point your smartphone camera at this screen. You'll pick up that QR code and you can save the link. Is that working for you guys? Yeah, cool. Okay. So the first thing is the AWS blog. And all of those significant launches that I talked about, of the 1,430, are covered with blog posts on the AWS blog. So there are multiple posts per week going out on this channel that introduce new aspects of AWS to customers. From the introductory, such as brand new managed databases for Amazon Lightsail, which is a very easy to use VPS-style hosting service that we provide, through to features that are intended for high scalability or advanced use cases, like new parallel query features for Amazon Aurora, which is a high scalability, high performance database engine for our RDS service. So we cover all of our significant new launches on the AWS blog. That's a really good RSS feed to subscribe to and a really good way to stay up to date with AWS. The second thing is via social media and via collaborative channels like GitHub, for example. So you can find AWS on Twitter. You can find AWS startups, including live coverage from Web Summit this week on Twitter at AWS Startups. And you can also find Amazon Web Services on Facebook as well if you are interested in following our events. And we do live stream on Facebook from events like this as well. So there's lots of opportunities to stay up to date with us using social media. Many presences on GitHub. The main AWS GitHub account where you'll find our SDKs are maintained, and important AWS projects like AWS Amplify are also maintained there, which we'll cover, I think, in the next section with Alex right here. AWS Labs, it's code samples, experimental applications, sample apps, projects that are in incubation that we're currently working on that haven't made it to fully supported status. They're often on the AWS Labs, so you can find us and follow us there. And we have an additional samples repo as well with many excellent full-blown applications that have been created using AWS services as well. Why write your own code from scratch when you can fork somebody else's perfectly good code and make it work for you, I always say. So that's a good tip for developer productivity. You can also, of course, follow us on Twitch. You may be watching us on Twitch right now, so hi if you're watching us on Twitch. But you can also follow us on Twitch from events like this. You can also follow our coverage of AWS Reinvent coming up later this month on Twitch. And you can also follow our live coding sessions on Twitch. So we have quite a few engineers within AWS that code live on stream. So if you want to learn about how to use specific AWS services or new architectural approaches, new approaches to application development in the cloud, why not watch an expert do it live on stream and learn from the expert, ask them questions, and follow us on Twitch if you're interested in doing that. There's a lot of content there. I mentioned AWS Reinvent quite a few times already. So this is the 26th to the 30th of November this year. We will have lots of news, lots of new AWS services. You can follow the whole thing live on twitch.tv/AWS or at live.awsevents.com/reinvent, where we'll also live stream the keynotes, and I think some selected sessions may also be live streamed there as well. So stay up to date with us and our coverage from reInvent using that channel. And then lastly, of course, stay with us for the rest of Web Summit 2018. We have several speakers in the main program appearing on some of the larger Web Summit stages. Right behind you if you're sitting in the theater, and virtually behind you if you're watching on Twitch, you can look over your shoulder into your room or lounge. You'll see that we have an Ask the Experts bar here. You won't really see that if you're watching on Twitch, but if you're in the theater, you'll see it just behind the theater here. So you can hang out with our solutions architects, with our startup business development team. If you've got detailed questions that you want to ask us, please go and see our team over there. And of course, come back for the developer workshops. And this is what we have for you over the course of the next 3 days. Coming up next, we have Alex Castelboni from our team in Italy, talking about product development with continuous delivery and serverless computing. He'll be diving deep into some of the topics that I skimmed over in the course of that quick demo that I showed you there. Real-time interactive applications, graph databases, data-driven apps for mobile and web with GraphQL, building serverless websites and web applications with Boaz, and then at 4 p.m., Frank's going to be up getting started with container-based applications in the cloud. That's today. Tomorrow, we have a repeat of this session at 10, and then I'll be back on stage for AI and machine learning at Amazon. So we'll be diving into how Amazon puts machine learning to work to build products like the Amazon Echo, to automate processes and activities within Amazon fulfillment centers, and other aspects of innovation within Amazon that rely on machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies. That will be a very well-attended session, I predict. So if you want to come along for the 11 a.m. tomorrow, I would recommend getting here early. There'll be quite a queue for that one, I would imagine. Then we'll do more on AI in the course of the day. Deep learning demystified. So what are neural networks? How can you put them to use in order to build artificial intelligence features within your apps? We'll talk about chatbots and AI. I'll be up at 2 for that. Scalability and multi-region operations are topics that we will tackle at the end of the day tomorrow. And then on Thursday, back to ML first thing, but with an edge computing flavor. So how can you deploy machine learning into connected devices? How can you build things like intelligent connected doorbells or intelligent connected security cameras or other intelligent sensor devices using the cloud? Then we'll get on to chaos engineering and reliability engineering with Adrian at the back there, one of our foremost experts in the reliability engineering area. He'll be up at 12 on Thursday. That'll be a really excellent session. Data collection, so how can you build pipelines to process events generated in real time using the cloud. Similarly, on transaction processing, and we'll talk more about IoT in general terms. How can you build connected device applications using some of those IoT services that we have? And then we'll wrap up on Thursday with a session for mobile developers about ad-based monetization opportunities in web and mobile apps with developer advocate Dennis Hills from our team in the US. So we have a complete content agenda for you, and I really hope that you will join us for those sessions over the course of the week. Okay, there's a reward for attending our sessions, which is $200 in AWS credits. So as long as we scanned you when you entered the theater, if we didn't scan you when you're watching outside, go and get scanned, and you will get your $200 AWS credit. And we'll also send you a link to all of the materials from all of the theater sessions this week, so you'll be able to get access to the slides from every session. And all of the content will be available on Twitch on demand as well, post the event. So if you miss anything, go to twitch.tv/AWS, click the videos tab at the top, and you'll see recordings from this week that will be available for, I think, for around 90 days on the platform. So you'll be able to see the content from the theater over the course of the week as well. Okay, does anybody have any questions they want to ask? We've got 8 minutes left on this time slot, so if anybody's got any questions that have been spurred by what they've seen in that first session, I'm really happy to answer them. We have a microphone here that will make you visible and heard on Twitch and on the AV system. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? Okay. Does anybody on Twitch have any questions? The microphone's coming to you from the back.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to know if...
Can you really speak up into the mic?
Sorry. You talked about different availability zones and how many services you have. Are all services available in all... Sorry, not availability zones, sorry,
all regions. Yeah, so the answer to that is not quite all services, but we are striving to have all services available in every region. If you have the specific gap, okay, where you need a service in a region where we don't have it, then you should definitely go over there, talk to an SA on that booth, and tell them about your use case and your company. The way we prioritize services for deployment is based on demand. So the more customers in a region tell us they need a service, the higher it will go up our priority list, and the more quickly we will roll out services to that region. There's one caveat there, which is the China region, okay, which we need to just quickly talk about. So for China, you need a separate set of AWS credentials because of the regulatory regime there. We have 2 regions in China, one in Beijing, one in Ningxia. So what you will do is register for a China account, get a separate set of credentials, and there's a slightly different service availability list in China because of the regulatory regime, okay, which you need to be aware of. But everywhere else in the world, we're striving for ubiquity across all services in all regions.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay. Any questions from Twitch or any more questions in the room? Yeah, down here. I'll give you this mic, maybe, if you wouldn't mind just grabbing that off me. Thanks very much.
Hello. First of all, I would like to say big thank you to AWS because I believe like many years ago, internet changed the world. AWS now changing internet and the world.
Thank you.
It's a great tool, and we're using AWS services in our company, and many services. And among all of them, there is only one weak point, as Amazon Web Services price calculator or cost calculator. It's very,
the cost calculator?
Yeah, it's a very user-unfriendly tool.
I'm looking at, you see this guy over here at the back with the grey hair, the other Brit? He's actually was, until quite recently, the executive owner for the cost calculator at AWS. So I think you should just go and talk to that guy and give him your feedback.
Well, are you guys going to change that? Maybe at Reinvent you will announce a new one?
We've launched a beta of a new one already, right? Yeah. So there's a beta of a new EC2 calculator out now, but I think that's extremely valid feedback, and I'm sure Adam Fitzgerald, who's sitting at the back of the room, would love to write your feedback down, so you should definitely talk to him about that. Yeah, it's a very common piece of feedback. One of the things that we strive to do internally, I should say something about our operating model, because this will give you an insight into why that is actually one of the harder problems to solve. When we create a new service at Amazon, we create a new team, okay? So one of the ways we can achieve that really high ramp in release velocity, we'll ask you a question. Has anyone tried to consistently do twice as much every year? Like twice as much gym, twice as much time with your family, twice as much work. The problem is there's a finite number of hours in the year, right? So actually continually stacking on double the amount of stuff with the same amount of your time is fundamentally impossible to do. So the way to do more stuff is to have more parallel people working on things. So when we create a new service, new team, that means that we have to really think hard about how we coordinate things like pricing calculator, also things like CloudFormation, which is our infrastructure as code tool. We have to create an environment where every team is able to self-serve so that they can create their own CloudFormation hooks, for example, or build their own integrations into the pricing calculator. So it's one of the more difficult problems to solve, but we are definitely working on it. Okay.
So I would like to ask, what are the new services?
Can you really yell? Sorry.
Yeah. Any hints on new services coming soon?
Okay, the roadmap. So we don't discuss the roadmap, and I'm sure you know that before you ask the question. Okay, so we don't talk about specific service launches other than under non-disclosure. Okay, so if you have a specific need in a specific area, then talk to our team. Okay, set up one of these mutual NDAs with our team, and we can then disclose to you a little bit more information about what we have coming. It's actually really valuable for us to incorporate customers into a feedback loop. So I really would encourage you to do that, to give us your frank feedback about what you need. And this doesn't just go for the person that asked the question, by the way. It goes for everybody. If there's something that AWS isn't doing that you feel would be valuable, maybe it's an open source product that you would like to see us provide a managed service on. Maybe it's a specific machine learning algorithm that you want us to support, or a specific framework that you think it would be valuable for us to have an SDK for. Please, please, please tell us about those things. 95% of our new stuff comes from customer feedback, from requests from customers saying, can you do X or Y? Or lots of customers saying, we've got a problem in this space that's hard to solve. And then we can consolidate that feedback together and build a new product, just like you guys all build new products in your companies. That's how we operate. So the whole process is driven by feedback. So please tell us what you need and be as specific as you can. And then we can either tell you whether we're working on something or incorporate it into our future plans. Okay, we are running out of time, so I'm going to wrap up this session and say, if you're watching on Twitch, stay with us. We will be back at the top of the hour with Alex Castelboni from our team in Italy. If you've joined us in the theatre, I want to thank you for coming along to session 1. Feel free to return here as many times as you want during the week. We'll be here all week, as they say, so you can come and see more great content from the rest of the AWS team anytime this week. But thanks for joining this first session. We'll see you soon on Twitch. Bye-bye.